Anyone that's ever played Mesa knows just how lethal she is for room clearing, and I'm sure that after the recent Exalted Ability rework, we all wanted to make her even more broken than she already was. If you haven't had the pleasure of playing Mesa or you just got her, congratulations, you found the right video. In this guide, I'll quickly go over how Mesa's abilities work while visiting a budget build for newer players, then follow it with my endgame build with my thoughts on how you should build her yourselves, and finish off with some gameplay of my build to show off its effectiveness in endgame missions. This is the first time I'm recording my voice, so I'm extremely conscious of that. Still, any feedback will be read and appreciated. I plan to make more videos like this regardless, but if you end up enjoying the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It lets me know you guys want more content like this, and gives me the energy to get videos out faster. With that all said, let's get started. So to quickly go over Mesa's abilities, her passive gives her extra reload speed with one-handed secondary weapons or increased fire rate with dual-wielding secondary weapons. Don't forego your melee weapon just to give her more health, it's never worth it. Ballistic Battery, even after its buffs, is her weakest ability, and most likely the ability you'll want to subsume out. The Augment is good for a build with niche interactions on some guns. I know some builds like those exist, but nothing crazy outside of that. Her second ability, Shooting Gallery, is a buff that stuns enemies within range while also giving her small damage increase. But with the damage buff's low base value and it unfortunately scaling additively with base damage mods, don't expect to even notice the damage buff on your weapons. The stun, however, is nice for Mesa's playstyle, and the augment is good too, which I'll get into later. Her third ability, Shatter Shield, is another defensive buff, this time giving her some of the highest damage reduction in the game, but only against ranged attacks like bullets and projectiles. So against things like melee, explosions, environmental hazards, Eximus auras, you will still take the full amount of damage. The augment is good at slowing down incoming damage from guns, but never really necessary. And her fourth ability, Peacemaker, is the reason why you play Mesa. You get a giant reticle on your screen and everything inside it's gonna get shot. As the reticle gets smaller, you'll fire faster and your shots will increase in damage. This ability is also an exalted weapon, meaning you'll be able to mod it directly via its own weapon slot in Mesa's loadout. So not only is its damage output extremely customizable, but it can become broken as well, especially after the recent update. The augment is nice and it has nice synergy with some mods and arcanes. If you're looking for a budget build, I'll put them up for both Mesa and her regulators now. These will fit on Mesa with just an Orokin reactor, no Forma needed. If you can't follow the build one for whatever reason, just remember two things. One, Mesa likes duration, so build for that. And two, keep her ability range at 100%, or at the very least, try not to go too little or too over, too under or too over 100% ability range. Range is negligible on her fourth ability, only affecting the size of the reticle. The difference is it being either the size of a dime or a quarter when you're at minimum or maximum range. On her third ability, range affects how far enemies can be to become viable for their attacks to be reflected back to them. I wrote a comment on the old Warframe wiki like 5 years ago detailing exactly how this reflection works, and if you're interested in that, link will be in the description. But reflected damage is weak against enemies in most cases, so you can just ignore range here as well. Mesa's second ability is where range matters, however. With it being a stun, you don't want to build for maximum range, as that will stun all enemies from so far away that it will slow down the mission, since they won't be able to come closer to you to get shot at. At the same time, you don't want your range to be so low that this ability won't be able to stun melee type enemies until after they have already closed the gap and hit you. A bit of spoiler territory here, but it should be fine since I'm not getting into the lore. I'm just explaining the mechanics of the skills that you can unlock, so no lore is going to be spoiled here. If you have just completed the War Within quest as a new player, the best focus school for Mesa is Zeneric. Mesa likes having her 2 and her 3 active at all times, with her 2 having an energy cost of 50 with a duration of 30 seconds and her 3 having an energy cost of 75 with a duration of 25 seconds. The total energy cost per second you could consider to have both of these active is 4.67 energy per second. Her 3 also wants at least 119% ability strength to get to the ability's damage reduction cap. Zeneric provides both of these. There, you get 5 energy regen per second, as well as the 20% ability strength from this school alone, checking off both requirements for Mesa regarding sustainable energy and ability strength. And this is all before investments in ability duration and efficiency on Mesa. Once you add those into your build, Zenark just becomes even more efficient. But now we're going to get into the endgame setup I've got going on for Mesa. To start off, I'll continue where we left off from the beginner build. I'm only running 3 mods for my energy economy, and I find that with this build, that's plenty enough for the sheer amount of enemies you'll be killing, especially Eximus units that just guarantee energy orb drops. Prime Continuity brings down the energy cost per second concept that I covered in the beginner build from both your 2 and your 3 to about 3.07 energy per second. Energy Nexus pretty much covers that, providing 3 energy per second, but if you really feel the need to have a net positive in energy, Dreamer's Bond will provide more than enough energy while also providing some health regen. And if you want even more energy, Energy Siphon exists, so you can do that as well. I personally run Holster Amp for the extra damage with how freeform this Mesa build's combat style is, but honestly, run whatever aura you want, doesn't really matter. And then Prime Flow is here for obvious reasons, bigger energy pool, more efficient combo casting, as well as you get to shoot regulators longer. For survivability, I'm running Archon Vitality, Fire Blast assumed over Ballistic Battery with the Healing Flame Augment, and Rolling Guard alongside Mesa's Waltz. While you're in Peacemaker, Mesa is very vulnerable as you can't move at all until you turn it off. And while your second and third abilities should theoretically cover all your bases against melee units and ranged units, while you go to town your 4, at higher levels in Steel Path, in Archimedia, in Circuit, shit happens. You will take damage, and while Rolling Guard is a good safety net against that, you will need to deactivate your 4 to activate it, since you can't move at all, including parkour maneuvers. And there's also a tiny delay after doing so, where you can't roll immediately. However, Mesa's Vault fixes this by just allowing you to roll around in your 4 anyway, so that fits perfectly alongside Rolling Guard. Especially since it fits in the augment slot right here. In your Exilus slot, I'm sorry. Healing Flame is here to patch up the vitality. And since strength affects health restoration, Umbral Intensify is a nice lazy way to increase ability strengths across your entire build without repercussions or restrictions, such as like Blind Rage sacrificing efficiency, or Precision Intensify only buffing your Peacemaker. Regarding Archon Vitality, you can opt out and choose to go for Umbral Intensify instead if you want to increase your maximum health even further, as well as your ability strength. But I'm running a lot of heat in my kit, namely in Fire Blast as well as Regulators, modded for heat damage, so I'm trying this out for now. For Arcanes, Arcane Velocity is undoubtedly the best arcane to run on Mesa. Additional fire rate on critical hits. This effect is constant with how often Mesa is going to crit on this build, and this single arcane replaces fire rate on both her regulators and equipped secondary weapon. So that's 2 free mod slots that this arcane is providing, which is really strong. Now you might have noticed I named my config Arcane Hotshot, but I'm running Arcane Avenger here. No one at the moment has, or should have, a fully maxed out Arcane Hotshot. So Avenger here is just to emulate Arcane Hotshot in a way. Worth noting, regulators are currently bugged with Hotshot, where even if you proc heat on your regulators, they won't build Hotshot stacks. So hilariously ironic for an arcane named Hotshot to not work with a gunslinger Warframe. But this is most certainly a bug, so expect a future patch to fix this soon. Now, why am I running all this heat if I can't even use Hotshot yet? Because I'm running 5 Archon Shards. The Azure Shard here is just to provide some passive health regen, which is very nice, I'm not gonna lie. But these 4 Topaz Shards all come together, provide a total of plus 300% critical chance on my secondary weapons for the rest of the mission after killing enough enemies affected by heat procs. With Fire Blast and both my regulators and my equipped primary weapon, modded for heat damage, I always tend to reach the critical chance cap on these topaz shards within the first 60 seconds of a mission. So this is just pretty much like instant secondary critical chance increase by 300%. Speaking of my primary, I've chosen to run with the Kuva Ogress. If you saw the thumbnail, you could already guess why. But the Ogress is actually really good just to aim in the general direction of a group of enemies and wipe them all out while ensuring they are inflicted by heat procs. Nightwatch Napalm guarantees heat procs regardless of your modded damage types. Malignant and Rhyme are here for viral, and Hellfire, Cannonade, Elementalist, and Merciless are all here just to increase the Ogress's heat damage even further. Obviously, I went with Heat for my Valence damage bonus, just to increase heat even more. And Ammo Mutation is here to patch up the poor ammo economy of this weapon, as the Ogress only generates a single rocket back per ammo pickup. So this definitely helps you to just keep shooting constantly. For the secondary weapon, I've gone with Dual Toxicist Incarnon, and I'll explain the Incarnon perks I've gone with before getting into the mods. Now, both Evolution 2 perks are fantastic, but I chose Fevered Frenzy since the multi-shot buff, like my shards, lasts for the entire mission, as well as multi-shot building Incarnon ammunition. On Evolution 3, there's only really one choice. Eject Magazine is an Exilus mod for secondaries that automatically reloads 20% of your gun's magazine per second, every second that you have it holstered away. Steady Hands is another Exilus mod that reduces your gun's recoil by 60%. Dual Toxicists by default have a unique trait where landing weakpoint hits will temporarily give you additional toxin damage, infinite ammo, increased fire rate, and reduced recoil. Coupled with Exilus mods and Incarnon perks, this essentially eliminates all recoil on Dual Toxicists, making prolonged shooting less exhausting to maintain. However, Marksman's Hands only gives you 50% reduced weapon recoil, while Steady Hands will give you 60%. And it just pretty much all depends upon whether you want to automatically reload 20% of your magazine with Eject Magazine, or 50% with this perk, Evolved Autoloader. And with infinite ammo, Ready Retaliation will never work anyway. So, just go for Evolved Autoloader most of the times, in my opinion. And like I said, this build is very freeform in its combat style. I'm going to be switching between weapons a lot, so this Evolved Autoloader perk just pretty much guarantees that if I switch for even like a second, I'm going to get all my magazine, I'm going to get my entire magazine reloaded on Dual Toxicist. On Evolution 4, again, you really only have one choice. Ripper rounds. There's a mod that provides a better way to get punched through than this. Neurotoxin, again, Dual Toxicists already get additional toxin damage on headshots innately, so this is unnecessary. And Commodore's Fortune buffing Dual Toxicist's pathetically poor base critical value of 5% up to 25% is just too good not to choose. Then we have the build itself. Galvanized Shot synergizes with Secondary Encumber. Diffusion, Target Cracker, and Bullseye are just here for more damage. And Steady Hands to eliminate all recoil on these guns after you've already triggered the Dual Toxicist innate unique trait. For my elementals, I'm running Scorch, Frostbite, Jolt for Corrosive Blast, and that's right, I did say Corrosive Blast and not Corrosive Electric because the additional toxin damage from Dual Toxicist Incarnon's bonus from landing headshots will mix with your modded elemental damage types at the end, so this will create Blast, and the electricity will mix with toxins to create Corrosive. I mentioned not choosing Ripper rounds because it's a better method of obtaining punch through. Merciless Gunfight is that reason. It'll provide both multi-shot, I'm sorry, not multi-shot. It'll provide both punch through and extra critical damage. This gun's Incarnon form is also giving its shots bullet ricochet effect. The bullet ricochet automatically targets enemies' heads. So if you see some enemies grouped up, and if you've got Incarnon ammunition, no need to aim for the head, just unload, and you'll activate the Dual Toxicist innate trait just automatically without any effort. Unless, of course, if you really want to dish out the damage on that one target that you're aiming at, like if it's a Skuldra Dedicant or something like that, then by all means, just go for headshots. Skipping over my equipped melee weapon for now, I'll get into the build for my regulators. I'm running Frostbite and Pestilence for viral, Heated Charge for heat to also trigger my Topaz Archon shards, as well as Arcane Hotshot whenever I get around to maxing that out. Magnetic Might to help deal with shields and overguard, while also buffing critical damage, and the rest increases damage even further. Interesting parts here are the Arcane and Exilis selections. Now, if you have a max ranked secondary outburst, I believe that Neramon is the best focus school for Mesa now. Yep, you heard that right. This Arcane alone makes the best focus school for Mesa, the Gunslinger Warframe, the school that is best known for its proficiency with melee weapons. At 12x melee combo multiplier, this grants you a plus 240% critical chance and critical damage buff for 30 seconds for both regulators as well as your equipped secondary weapon at the cost of consuming your entire melee combo. Now, this was already a thing before the Exalted ability rework. If you equipped this onto a secondary weapon, it would buff and will buff both itself and regulators, but I always found it kind of clunky and niche to do this. Imagine building melee combo, then you wanted to switch to your primary to shoot so you don't consume all that melee combo when you don't need it. But you can't remember whether your previous weapon was either your primary or your secondary, so now you're unsure whether to press right mouse or F to avoid accidentally activating this arcane. That was in the way that it was clunky. In the way that it was niche, you couldn't always guarantee this weapon in your loadout, since content like the Circuit and Archimedia will randomize your weapon selections. Having this arcane directly equipped onto Mesa's regulators, however, solves both of these issues. There's no other way to equip regulators other than pressing 4, so activating secondary outbursts is now a decision that will always be in your control. And now you'll be able to have this buff on every secondary weapon, not just the one secondary weapon that this arcane would be equipped on. So randomized loadouts become much less of an issue. Then there's reflex draw. Now, you might be wondering why regulators, guns that have 0 recoil and never miss, need reduced recoil and increased accuracy, and the simple answer is it's not for regulators, it's for whatever guns you've chosen to equip. That's right. Reflex draw's effect applies on both primary and secondary weapons, despite it being a mere pistol mod. When equipped onto regulators, reflex draw doesn't actually work when you press 4. So when does it work? Whenever you switch any of your equipped weapons, including melee. So you want reduced recoil and increased accuracy for free on every single gun in the game without even having to consume your secondary outburst stacks? Just put reflex draw onto Mesa. It might as well be her new passive with how free it is, and it works effortlessly with holster amp, the aura that I equipped it. So there's that too. One last note, Creeping Bullseye, secondary outburst, and those 4 Topaz Archon shards that I equipped on my Mesa bring up Regulator's critical chance up to 210%. They're already starting to dip into red crit territory, and with Arcane Avenger / Arcane Hotshot, those red crits will only get more consistent. And finally, we're going to get into the melee weapon. Now, if you notice, I'm going to go back really quickly, that I had Muzzle Flash on my Mesa build. That's because blinded enemies take increased damage from melee attacks. And since I'm running Neramon on my Mesa, that's the only excuse she needs to equip an augment to buff her melee damage output even further. For my melee, I actually built Azah. Here are the parts to make it. It's Laka Grip, Ulta Strike, and Varkit to Jai Link. Ironically, this is actually the part in the build where you can get to be the most creative. Most of Mesa's value with melee is coming from secondary outburst, which only cares about melee combo generation. Neramon has Power Strike to preserve your melee combo count, as well as Opening Slam to get you to 12x combo at essentially half the required number of hits. So in a sense, Neramon is the melee weapon that you're pairing alongside secondary outburst, and the actual melee weapon itself, you're just choosing just for flavor on Mesa, really. You could equip whatever melee weapon that you like, as well as whatever mods that you like, and they'll work perfectly fine with this build. Speaking of which, this Zaw I built is one built for balanced speed and damage, while maximizing critical chance at the cost of status chance. The status chance being 10%, that is perfectly fine. Swooping Falcon has built-in bleed procs and knockdowns in its combos innately, which pairs perfectly alongside merits and afflictions. Merit naturally preparing to send enemies into a lifted state with one-handed swords, since their heavy attacks lift enemies and knock them down, pairs up perfectly with melee afflictions after they've already accumulated some bleed procs for you to from your normal attacks, and then Merit will then launch them with afflictions amplifying that bleed, and afflictions will amplify the bleed from both your heavy attacks as well as your combos built-in knockdowns. You can see just in its neutral combo, it has a forced knockdown in the end after a bleed proc, so enemies will be bleeding heavily. Weeping Wounds and Elementalist to increase both the frequency and intensity of bleed procs, reach and pressure for obvious reasons, and the rest are here to dramatically increase critical chance as well as provide some increased attack speed and critical damage. At 12x combo, my Zaw's normal hits are over 300% critical chance, while the heavy attack is over 400%. And Exodia Hunt is the reason why I chose to craft the Zaw for my Mesa. Nerimon's opening slam is triggered via a melee slam, and Exodia Hunt, if it procs, ties in perfectly with Nerimon's opening slam, increasing both your combo count as well as kills per minute. Now, if you notice by now that this entire loadout is based around being flexible and freeform in its combat style, give yourself a pat on the back. That's exactly what it was designed around. If you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, this build is based around fighting with every weapon in Mesa's loadout as stylishly as one can, while retaining a sense of like organic synergy. You're not sacrificing any efficiency in this build. It's the reason why I chose to forego melee crescendo, where you gain initial combo for the rest of your mission that you think would pair perfectly alongside secondary outburst. It's just that in the missions where you would need secondary outburst, you kind of want to get the ball rolling immediately, and you spending like 2 whole minutes just to set up melee crescendo, it just kills your kills per minute. Ironically, with this build, I pretty much easily maintain around 100 kills per minute in Steel Pass survivals, and that's all while having fun juggling through all my weapons. Like, I'm not just using the only thing in my arsenal that's like really dishing out the AoE kills. Like, I'm using everything in my arsenal, so it's a lot of fun. And speaking of Steel Pass Survival, that's exactly what I recorded for this video. I went to Tech Rot Survival and Legasite Harvest on Steel Path just to see how well all of this performs against a faction that's so incredibly aggressive with melee. And I had a great time. If you've listened to me ramble on this long into the video, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment and enjoy the gameplay.
To find out things. You didn't come down here to do the minimum, did you? Now you think you can do it the hard way. Now you get to do things the hard way.